Well, as if we all couldn't be more surprised at the ineptitude of Urban Meyer's tenure in Jacksonville, we get the now infamous quote, "Hey, who's that number 99 on the Rams? I've heard we should watch out for him." Like this is the extent
It
of
can't
what
be
we're
real.
talking about. This happened within a matter of like 2 months in the league, man. It's
It can't be real. It can't.
unbelievable.
He had to have been joking.
I really hope so, but from what the article mentioned, it did not appear that way to those who passed along that information.
I gotta be honest. I just don't know at all what to think about that. I was reading all the quotes, and you put your mind in such a pretzel, and it makes me wonder what really was going through Urban's head when he decided to take the job. Like, did he really think it'd be that easy? And it makes you wonder at Ohio State, who was doing the real work, like the X's and O's work? If it clearly wasn't Urban. Like,
Yeah.
Urban was just the guy who he really was the CEO. I will go in and recruit the hell out of kids, bring them in. I will, kiss babies, shake hands. I will dance with co-eds, and I will be the face of the program. Teach classes on ethics and let my coaches get away with murder, basically. And then, did he think it was going to be that way in the NFL? There's just no way that is all accurate. I honestly, I trust the Athletic.
Don't know, man.
I do trust the Athletic in their reporting, but I mean, come on, man.
It does make sense though in some regards.
Well, yeah.
For instance, you're in this bubble of college football where you're the man. All you're focused and worried about is the recruits you're getting and the next game that you're going to be playing. You're not even probably watching the NFL at that point because the workload is just so intense. And for someone who, from multiple reports now has a very, overconfident side to his personality, that is someone that's probably like, I don't even need that. I don't need to watch the NFL. I don't need to care about any of that stuff. While other coaches with those potential aspirations for their future may stay in tune to that type of stuff a little bit more closely. But that is what makes it mind-boggling that, like you said, like that the fact that he was still confident in going to a league that apparently he didn't know much about at all. I mean, you're not aware of the players in this league. If it's true that he wasn't aware about Aaron Donald, then who was he aware of? Because, we're talking about one of the faces of the league. Did he know who Tom Brady was? Maybe it's like, that's the guy from the Gillette commercials, right?
It's funny, but honestly, especially because he had a year off.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like, you would think if your goal was to actually consider an NFL job, listen, it's clear it's a bad look because you had so many things that went wrong from hiring the strength coach from your first move. Clearly it does like this. It's going to be hard for him to dispute this and say this was false because it is fairly easy to digest. I don't know if it's easy to believe because it's almost unbelievable, but it does go in line with this whole view of Urban Meyer where it's like this guy clearly just was really good at being the CEO and the face of a program and recruiting. And I don't know what else he was good at this stage of his career. Cause that is a debacle. That's a disaster.
Look, even X's and O's guys struggle when they get to the league. Chip Kelly is a prime example, right? I mean,
he had good success and he fell apart. The message fell apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Lane Kiffin, we've seen these happen. There are, few great X's and O's guys, even at the college level, when it comes to head coaching. And it just shows that, he was a lot more excellent at wielding, power and holding that and having his ability to create structure around everything that he envisioned and wanted to
Yeah.
do. But yeah, I mean, you heard the quotes of what he said to apparently to Trevor about John Brown right in front of him about how, he's from the South. He can't, their transcripts aren't all right or something like that. I mean, it's just offensive, bizarre behavior from this guy, but it is all in line with these stories that we're hearing. And look, when there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe not all of it's
Yeah.
true,
But
but
some,
there's a reason that people are feeling compelled to say stuff about the guy in this way. Clearly, it just didn't work out. But hey, they're better days ahead for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're in
yeah,
good hands with Doug Peterson for sure.
absolute. Now I feel this way. Absolute 0% chance he gets a chance within the next 3 years to run a major program.
Yeah,
I could see him Rick Pitinoing it a little bit, having to maybe go to like an Iona, like he gets a chance at a non-power 5 or a low-level power 5, a team that gets desperate and overpays, an Illinois, you know what I mean? Like that is not necessarily a power, football program, because at this point in time, I mean, there's so much he's going to have to answer to the next time he does get a job that honestly, if I was Urban's agent and I was Urban's family, I would tell him, you need to at least lay low for another 2 years of just keeping your head down, staying out of conversation.
just mail it in. I mean, the guy's made so much over his career. Just mail it in, man. You're
Fox
just
Sports will take you back.
I mean, maybe, TV might take a couple years too to kind of let the dust settle, but either way, I mean, he's got a lot of money to write a book or something. I mean, I don't know, just stay away a little bit. I think that would benefit all the parties. But yeah, that was definitely some interesting news to kind of kick off our day in an otherwise just crazy week that we knew was going to happen. Obviously, last time we talked here on the show, it was the legal tampering period. A lot of news broke about who was going where. It was made official on Wednesday with a lot of teams. And then since Wednesday, we've had a lot of recent additions, trades, of course, some huge topics. So I guess we'll just dive right in, Mark, to the biggest one of them all being Deshaun Watson to the Cleveland Browns. The Texans get a haul in this deal. The Browns give up a massive amount, 3 first-rounders, a 2023 third, and a 2024 fourth for Deshaun Watson and a 5th rounder in 2024. The craziest part about this is a $230 million contract that's completely, fully guaranteed, the largest guaranteed contract ever in the history of the sport by $80 million. Deshaun Watson, a Cleveland Brown, this coming after a grand jury decided not to indict him on several criminal charges. But Mark, as we all know, he's facing 22 civil suits, and the league is very likely going to suspend him for a section of games. We don't know what amount, but certainly a risk on the Browns' part, and they clearly went all out in this move. And we'll get to kind of what this means for Baker Mayfield and the rest later. But your initial thoughts on this signing here, or trade, I should say.
My initial thoughts is that a low self-esteem franchise in Cleveland was willing to go above and beyond to try to compete and to stay somewhat relevant. And what I mean is there's two sides to this. Deshaun Watson and his camp earlier last week, the report came out that Cleveland's out of the running, right? And all the focus turned to Carolina, Atlanta, and New Orleans. And what it means to me is the fact that all of a sudden Cleveland was back in and the deal was done, is that when Cleveland got the no, they found out what it was that Atlanta and the other teams were actually willing to do. And Cleveland not only did that, but they did that and then some. Similar to what we talked about with Jacksonville Jaguars, basically having to pay an extra probably $15 to $20 million to a player like Christian Kirk to choose Jacksonville over contender or any other team. It's like the Jacksonville tax. You have to pay a certain price because your organization is not as good. And if you're going there, most likely you're going to sacrifice probably winning Pro Bowls. You're going to sacrifice your chance at, hoisting a Lombardi trophy during the duration of that contract. But you got to make it worth it on some other end. I got to net an extra $15 million and the no state tax. Cleveland paid a Browns tax for this deal. And the blood, Deshaun Watson's agent were sharks. They were blood. They smelled blood in the water, and they pounced on Cleveland. I'm sure they said no to Cleveland's original offer. Cleveland's original offer was probably better than any of the other teams' offers to begin with. Carolina's not desperate. Atlanta is certainly not desperate. And New Orleans, none of those teams are going to be willing to be completely hamstrung by Deshaun Watson. But Cleveland was. Cleveland said basically, here's the keys to the car and the keys to the house. And you know what? We'll just sign over the deed right now, and we'll just be happy to be in the car with you. And we'll sit here and look at you and hope that you fix everything for us. And I know this for a fact because of the deal that Deshaun Watson got. And to me, it's kind of gross. It's kind of disgusting. Of that $230 million is guaranteed, Deshaun Watson's actual contract salary for the 2022-2023 season is $1 million. That's it. And what does that mean? Well, that means if Deshaun Watson gets suspended, which, as you pointed out, most likely will happen when some of these civil lawsuits start getting settled, and he will pay out some civil settlements, and he will settle a lot of these outside of court. The league will suspend him for games like that because it's a bad look on the league. They don't want their players involved in any sort of scenarios where civil lawsuits are involved, especially ones that are of the nature that Deshaun Watson has been involved in. You will get suspended games. Your suspended games, you lose money from your paycheck, from your actual salary. His salary is only $1 million. That's disgusting. He could miss 8 games next year, only lose $500,000. It's not going to come out of that guaranteed money. They cannot touch that. The NFL cannot legally go after that. The Browns are just signing it off. The ownership, the Haslam Group, just signing it and giving it to them. Signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours. So in order for Cleveland, this is how desperate and how bad of a franchise Cleveland is. They could have just drafted him in the first place. They didn't. They then trade away their whole future. This year's first, next year's first, the following year's first, and 2 other starting picks, a second and a third, for one player. A team that's good. It's a very good roster, but it's not like they're not going to have holes over the next couple of years that draft picks could certainly help them with. They're going to have to get really creative with the salary cap. A lot of people are saying, well, it's guaranteed money. Doesn't affect the salary cap. That's just not true either. That money does come out. It has to be paid somewhere. They're going to push it down the line. Certainly, he's going to be there for 5 years, so they can extend it over a certain time, but eventually they have to pay the piper. So it's the perfect mix of the most desperate of franchises basically signing over their blood oath to a guy who smelled blood in the water, got everything that he wanted and then some. And I mean, I feel a little gross about it. From a football standpoint, it does make sense. The AFC North has 2 great young quarterbacks. For them to stay relevant, they got a taste of success in making the playoffs last year, but 2 years ago now. They want to be. They understand how much more money you make as a relevant franchise. Being in that playoff discussion, Cleveland saw those dollar signs. They realized that that's what it. If this is what it takes to be competitive and to be able to lock up their quarterback. From a football standpoint, I understand the move. But overall, to me, it feels really shady. It feels like a really beaten down, low self-esteem, desperate franchise making a really desperate move. And I bet if you're Carolina, New Orleans, and Atlanta, you're looking at all that, you're going, you know what? If that was the price that they had to pay, I'm glad we didn't pay it. Because not only are they paying all those guarantees, they're paying all those draft picks. And if you're Houston, you get rid of Deshaun Watson. You get that out of the building. You don't have to deal with the headlines of that anymore. I think Houston overall is a bad franchise that handled this situation very well. The NFL, remember, didn't tell Houston to not play him. Houston just took it upon themselves to remove him, and they still paid him, but they just like, we don't want to deal with this. We don't want this in our locker room. Kudos to Houston. And now they get a haul of picks to rebuild and start over in an AFC where right now, if you don't have a Super Bowl roster, there's no point in overspending and playing. You might as well be in a rebuild in the AFC because in 5 years from now, that's your next chance to really be competitive in the AFC if you're not right now currently competitive.
Yeah, I think this is a potential disaster for Cleveland. And I'll spell this out for a number of reasons. The first one for me is it's an obvious risk. We know this is a risk because of not only the impending suspension that's likely to come, but because not only are you rolling the dice on a potential massive character flaw in someone that it's not just a character flaw, it's something to where you're bringing someone into an environment with female employees that, how comfortable are they that you're bringing someone in? Like, how do they feel about that? You're taking a risk on what could happen in this civil suit in general, not just the suspension, but what could come of this. And we don't even know if potential future criminal charges could come out of this. So obviously for that reason, and that's a huge reason for why this is problematic. Another aspect of why this is so problematic is you are fully guaranteeing someone who, in my view, and I think you'd probably agree, isn't the cream of the crop in the NFL at the quarterback position. There are quite a few quarterbacks, probably a handful, that I would say are much better than Deshaun Watson. Now, he's obviously one of the better quarterbacks, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, super talented, young, can win games for you and make splash plays. But let's not forget this guy can be a little erratic, isn't the most accurate quarterback. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Pat Mahomes. He's not Justin Herbert. I would take all of those guys over him. I'd probably take Joe Burrow over Deshaun Watson. So you're not only like from the football field play aspect of this, you're way overpaying for this guy. Another thing is this team is in a built to win now type of roster situation. They've got high level guys that they're paying a lot of money. This is not going to be the case in about 2 years. So they're banking on the next couple of years. Well, next year, you may be without him for 6 to 8 weeks. And that's a problem. Now they signed Jacoby Brissett to hopefully bridge that gap. And hopefully the floor of that is like 4-4 during those games. But you may very well not get super far or as far as you want next year just because of those factors. So say he comes back in 2023. Well, there's a lot of guys on this team right now that very well might not be there following the 2023 season or even following this season. Jack Conklin, your star right tackle, he's due for another contract. Got to pay him. You're probably going to end up eating some of Baker Mayfield's cap here. That's going to come over on the books. Denzel Ward, super talented corner. He's due for a contract. You got Greedy Williams,
one of the highest paid defensive players.
Myles Garrett, a huge contract. David Njoku, now that you got rid of Austin Hooper, David Njoku is now a super huge cap hit on you just for 1 year. Are you going to pay him? You're going to have no tight ends next year. So this roster is going to look way different in a couple of years. And all of a sudden you may be looking at a declining offensive line with Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper on offense. Nick Chubb, by the way, Kareem Hunt. You're going to have to pay one or both of these guys long term.
$20 million this year and $20 million next year, guaranteed.
Exactly. So this is a situation where if you don't win the Super Bowl in the next couple of years, you may very well be looking at an uphill battle. And we can just try and draft those replacements and hopefully get some good. Well, no, you gave away the farm in terms of draft picks as well. So this team is in a tough situation looking at 2023 and beyond. And so I think for so many reasons there, you are really rolling the dice and hoping that this guy not only becomes just a future Hall of Famer, but you're able to hit on 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounders in consecutive years here to get really talented players on their rookie deals.
Yeah.
It seems like a disaster potentially waiting to happen for the Browns. Not to mention, it's not like they're in the NFC South. If the Browns were in the NFC South, I could say maybe they got a better shot here. They're playing in the AFC North. That's going to be a super tough division to get through as well.
I think you nail something there as well that just adds on to what I was saying, is that this is the move of a desperate franchise with a very low self-esteem. You get to the playoffs once for the first time in ages, and you have this roster you feel is very win now, and you feel slighted by the fact that you probably originally made the best offer to Houston for Deshaun Watson, and you probably original pitch to Deshaun Watson was better than what Carolina, what Philly, what New Orleans, what anyone else who was calling Atlanta was offering. And he still said no to you. So in order for you to get back in this sweepstakes, I'm sure Deshaun Watson's agent was floored when he heard what Cleveland was then willing to do. They probably turned down $200 million guaranteed and, or whatever. And then, and Deshaun Watson then all of a sudden goes, wait a minute, you're going to give me a base salary of $1 million, guarantee me $230 million. So even if I miss games, it's like Cleveland was saying, we will stand in front of you and protect you. Without now, to our knowledge, we heard somewhere, I read a report somewhere that was the defense attorney for the majority of the 22 civil suits had said no one from the NFL has reached out to him directly to talk about it. So Cleveland's basically saying, we are going to, unabashedly defend you, protect you, give you a contract to protect you, and gives you a contract that rewards you more than anyone else has ever been rewarded in NFL history. And we're going to give Houston the farm to make Houston feel good about it as well. I'm sure that's what I'm saying. Atlanta, Carolina, any other team, New Orleans, there's no way their offer was even close to this. And I'm sure that when Deshaun Watson's agent hung up the phone with Cleveland, they looked at each other and said, why the bleep not? I mean,
if you're Deshaun, this is, you won the jackpot here.
You get everything you want. You have a roster that you can compete with. You have a team that's going to stick their neck out for you and defend you. And you have $230 million guaranteed as soon as you sign your name. You're going to get that money no matter what happens to you. You can go to jail and you're going to get that money. Yeah. It is such a win for Deshaun Watson. And it just goes to show you, if you're a fan of Cleveland, I don't blame a lot of Cleveland fans that did say, like, in Cleveland fan in search of a new team. I mean, I get it. I do believe in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty. And there will be no criminal charges of everything that was faced. But I also believe where there's smoke, there's fire. And there's going to be some payouts. There was some stuff done. Deshaun Watson is probably not the best guy in the world. I don't think he is innocent of everything that was accused of him. It's just the way stuff like this works in America, and what we see time after time after time after time. But that being said, I get it. If you're just a fan of this franchise going like, this is not going to work, because you mentioned it, and I didn't even talk about it really. If you want to start getting to the nitty gritty of it, as you mentioned, if this move doesn't pull off making the playoffs at least 3 of the next 5 years of this contract, then it's a massive failure. And you cannot guarantee me in the AFC that Cleveland is going to make the playoffs 3 of the next 5 years. You cannot.
Well, I'd argue they'd have to at least get to the championship in a couple of those of the next 5 years.
And I'm just even arguing. I don't think if any AFC team can guarantee you're going to make the playoffs 3 of the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Look at next year alone. I guarantee the number 1 overall seed last year, remember, in the AFC was the Tennessee Titans. You're telling me the Tennessee Titans aren't going to compete for the AFC South again? The Colts just got better. So the AFC South 1 spot is immediately gone, right? Okay. You then say, let's just say, going back to chalk, the Bengals win the AFC North again. The Bills are going to win the AFC East. And then so you have 3 of the 7 spots gone. 4 spots remaining. So the Browns are going to be competing for a wild card spot now with Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Indy, the Patriots, and then the 3 AFC West teams that don't make the win in the AFC West. You're telling me you guarantee Cleveland is one of those 3 of the best 4 teams? I cannot sit here and say that that's the case next year, because I don't even know if Deshaun Watson's going to be playing games next year with suspension. And then if it does play the whole season, we haven't seen him play in almost 2 years. He's injury prone, guys, torn his ACL twice. And I got to be honest, I like a lot of those other teams better. I like Denver better than Cleveland. I like the Chargers better than Cleveland. I like the Ravens better than Cleveland overall to have a bounce back.
Yeah.
With their MVP and Lamar Jackson.
I like the Colts better than Cleveland, probably.
Right in there to make the playoffs last year. And I think they got better at the quarterback position. We'll talk about it here next. So again, I think it's just one of those things where, everyone's talking about the AFC so loaded now, But also, I think that don't sit here and tell me. I've already seen the tweets from ESPN. And it makes me laugh. It's so short-sighted. It's for quick retweets and likes. It's the Rex Chapman effect of like, oh my God, how lucky are we? We get Burrow, Jackson, Watson for the next 7 to 10 years. We get Mahomes, Herbert, Carr, and Wilson for the next 7 years. No. This is the way the NFL works right now. I'll guarantee you get them for the next 3 years. The AFC will not have this much loaded talent in 5 years from now. The balance of power will shift. Coaches are going to get fired because they're not going to make the playoffs. GMs are going to get fired. They're going to want to bring in their own group of guys. Like the balance of power will shift back, quickly to the NFC as the old guys retire and everyone's flocking to it's just the way it's going to work. It's going to be a short, dominant run for the AFC to watch them cannibalize themselves over the next 3 years. And we as fans are going to enjoy the hell out of it. But I think, again, it's a overtly desperate move from an overtly desperate franchise. And I normally, in good business, don't pay the fifth best quarterback in a conference, not only just overall in the NFL. I'd argue he's the fifth best quarterback in the AFC at the peak. The most money ever guaranteed in NFL history. That's
a lot of money. Yeah, it's not, and if it was all more about winning than anything else, Atlanta, Carolina make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Easier divisions, easier pathway.
I blame Deshaun for taking this deal.
No, I mean,
no one was going to offer him close to this. This is correct. This is a team basically saying, hey, we'll take a chance on you versus a team saying, we love you. Here's $230 million.
And to your point about desperation, the Panthers picked 6th. The Falcons picked 8th. They were in a position where it's like, if we lose out on the sweepstakes, we'll take a quarterback.
Yeah.
We have a fallback here.
Yeah.
The Browns found themselves out of options, essentially, because they weren't going with Baker Mayfield. Let's touch on that real quick, because obviously Baker was very vocal once all of this news started circulating that, the Browns were making a hard push for Deshaun. And there were even reports coming out that said even if they didn't get Deshaun, they were going to move off of Baker Mayfield. He comes out, puts out a statement about, how much they love Cleveland, but, it's, it may be time, it's not going to be his fault if things go awry, and how much he respects the city for rallying around him. Smart move overall to, endear himself to the city at that point, because of things that transpired after the fact. But he has since, said that, he wants to be traded now. And initially the Browns denied the request, but obviously since acquiring Deshaun, they've now opened themselves up to it. We'll see where he lands. It looks like Seattle, given all of the quarterback shifting that's happened, is probably going to be a prime candidate for him. But just in terms of what Baker Mayfield provides, in your mind, has he gotten shafted in this whole process, or is this kind of something he also brought upon himself with not only his play, but just kind of, maybe his demeanor throughout the years? We've obviously seen some incidents with friction with teammates, and here he finds himself looking for not just a payday, but really for a contract that's going to help keep him in the league as a starter for several years, which he probably will get. It just depends on which team he falls with.
He's now in the same boat as Mitchell Trubisky. They're talented enough to win you games and keep you competitive for about playoff spots if they're healthy and if they have a ton of talent around them. And if he comes to terms with that, he will have a really nice career still in the NFL. He has got a tougher road to convince teams to do that than Trubisky, especially because Trubisky's in a great spot now where he's got talent around him to show like, hey, if I have talent around you, I can, like Teddy Bridgewater has done, he'll just keep getting contracts because he's an adult in the room who's always been kind, always been easy to get along with, and it will acquiesce to a lot of your desires. Baker is now trying to transition into that, and I think that love letter to Cleveland's fans was the first example of that. I'm not surprised by at all this. Listen, I'm the guy who was very staunch on, would have never taken Baker Mayfield number 1 overall. would have always thought of Baker Mayfield as a guy who can win you games, but is ceiling is Kirk Cousins, only with a little more attitude. I mean, I just never bought into Baker with anything beyond that. He was never an athletic freak, and increasingly in the NFL where you need extreme athleticism out of your starting quarterback. And listen, I think if Baker can find himself in Seattle, or if Baker can find himself somewhere else in the NFC, I think Baker would be very happy. I think Baker competing for a job in New York for the Giants makes a lot of sense. I think Baker, going to a place like a Carolina for a year to help stabilize that franchise makes a lot of sense. So if he can find that job, I'm all for it. I think Baker is more talented than a Tua. I think he's more talented overall as a starter than 40% of the league, but he's on that fringe of like Mitchell Trubisky with a lot of guys. You got to convince them, hey, give me a shot to run your franchise for 2 to 3 years while you then still figure out your future. Seattle would be a great spot for him to try and resurrect at least, another 2 years of starting while they try to regroup and figure out what's next for them at their franchise.
Yeah, totally agree. He's a guy that can win you games. He is a guy that can, start for a team for several years and get them enough play. Is he enough to elevate you? We haven't seen that yet. So that's the problem with Baker. But obviously his future in the NFL is going to be elsewhere, not in Cleveland, as they kind of have their quarterback room set now with Jacoby Brissett and, of course, Nick Mullins as the third string quarterback there. But this whole saga has been crazy. It's kind of been exhausting even as a fan.
Yeah.
Just the number of reports and the head fakes that we've had to deal with just over the last week has been crazy. But that's the NFL, and that's kind of the frenzy of free agency. But that's why we do shows like this, and that's why it's in high demand. So, take that for what it's worth. We have more quarterback news, of course, to get to with the news today coming out that, obviously the Falcons during a lot of this were in pursuit of Deshaun Watson when it became clear that, they weren't going to get him. He was going to Cleveland. Matt Ryan, during this process, they, once news came that they were searching for Deshaun, they deferred his the money that they owed him for the new league year to today. By 4:00, they owed him roughly over $7 million if he wasn't traded, but they were open to trade talks, and that has since come down as the Colts traded for Matt Ryan. They give up a 2022 third-round pick. Meanwhile, Atlanta takes the biggest dead cap hit of all time, over $40 million in dead money. But that's how much Atlanta was looking to move forward and was – I honestly think that this, some people may say they didn't do right by Matt Ryan. I think not only Matt Ryan gets his money, but he also goes to a place where he can win at the end of his career.
I think
they didn't dump him off to Seattle, for instance. He's in a winnable division with a really good team, stable organization, good head coach, and he's in a situation now where, as we talked about, can compete for the playoffs, but can also compete for a Super Bowl and has a lot of stability around him and a good fit for him as well in Indy. Meanwhile, the Falcons sign Marcus Mariota. It looks like they're either going to roll with him next year or sign a quarterback and either let him sit or ride with him. So your thoughts on the Matt Ryan deal to Indy?
I think Atlanta did Matt Ryan an absolute solid. And they said, listen, Matt, you're the greatest quarterback in our franchise history. And we're happy to pay you, but it's just time for a fresh start. And I think mainly that fresh start is for their head coach, Arthur Smith, because I think they like Arthur Smith a lot and they need to get moving on the process of, all right, what is Arthur Smith's offense and Arthur Smith's future actually like? We got to figure out if this is the head coach to really be our head coach for the next 5 to 10 years. And in order to do that, you got to speed up the process on life post Matt Ryan, right? And I think you're absolutely right. They did him a huge solid by sending him to a place like Indianapolis, where I think Indy is better today than they were last year. Now, I do worry a little bit about Indy's defense. They have a lot of talent on that defense, but they lost their 3 biggest defensive coaches. They're now
And they gave up Rocky Sin, which is crazy to me. The young, talented corner.
So they're now with the Chicago Bears. So their defense is worse, but their offense, I think, is better. And I think they're still, though, in a very winnable, competitive division. And so I think Indy is going to be very competitive for a wild card playoff spot next year or within their own division with Tennessee. And so good for Indy. I think it's the right move. You give up one of the picks you got for Carson Wentz, and you say to yourself, Indy now can say to themselves, let us go a full year with Matt Ryan, and let's see how the draft plays out. And if you're Atlanta Matt Ryan, you avoid the Eli Manning disaster where you are going to be better than any rookie quarterback they bring in. But if they would have drafted a guy in the first round and you start off 3-6, all the chance is going to be like, all right, can we just see what the rookie's got? And Matt Ryan gets to avoid that because with Indy, they know that even if they draft a guy, it's all about, hey, we have a roster that can win now. Let's be competitive and let's fight with Matt Ryan. You know what I mean? Like we stuck it through with Carson Wentz. So I think they did right by Matt Ryan. He gets his money. And now Matt Ryan will play that role for this year, next year, probably with Indy. And then, maybe a year or two after that, or maybe he goes off gracefully leaving the sun, is the veteran quarterback who is the now best version of the veteran who can teach a young quarterback, but can also maybe help you win right now this year. I think Matt Ryan is now the best version of that quarterback out there. And, good for him. He's not a Hall of Famer. This ends his career, I think, sooner rather than later, as far as just, he's made his money. Why take the beating? And he can ride off into the sunset in another couple years, depending on how long he wants to play. But his days of starting are now very limited, like Baker, like Mitchell Trubisky. When you have quarterbacks like that, who they get rid of by their first team, your career as a starter, it becomes now limited. You can really start to see the shelf life wearing off. And for Atlanta, getting Marcus Mariota, a guy who worked with Arthur Smith in Tennessee, and a guy that, can start in this league, I think he will be willing to come on in. And now Atlanta is going to be the biggest player in moving up for Willis. I think they have their sights set on Willis. And can they get to a point in the draft where they could draft him? It would not shock me if within the coming weeks you see Atlanta make a big trade with someone who's already got a quarterback at the top of the draft to get into that top 5 picks for a guy like Willis or Kenny Pickett or whoever they like at the top of the draft. They're going to be aggressive towards that, and they should. And Marcus Mariota is the perfect guy to say, start for this year, let the young kid develop behind him, and they reset their franchise. I think it's a great move for both franchises overall. And for Atlanta today, if you're a fan of the Atlanta Falcons, you should be feeling good about the future of your franchise compared to the Cleveland Browns. I know that seems crazy to say, but your franchise was probably willing to give up the picks to get Watson. They weren't willing to go the guaranteed money and the protections to protect Watson that way. I guarantee you, Atlanta and those teams wanted Deshaun Watson to give to them. We want you to take a pay cut. We're going to put our necks out there for you. And maybe Watson was willing to do it. But this time you don't hamstring your franchise with picks. You don't hamstring your franchise with money, and you don't have to worry about, is your quarterback going to be missing half a year in the coming years, or maybe more. So I think it's a win for both Indy and Atlanta.
Yeah, that's a good point about kickstarting the Arthur Smith era with the fresh start and letting him kind of have the full reins of the direction of that program. I totally agree with that aspect of things. And
Smith won't get fired. He is now job safe next year, even if it's a disaster. And that's, I think, a good thing, because you've got to figure out if this is the head coach going forward.
Yes.
And give him a quarterback now to build around.
You have to have some patience with head coaches, unless it's a complete dumpster fire, like the Freddie Kitchens thing was pretty apparent that you move off of that. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are certain situations, Urban Meyer, where you know that you got to move off of it sooner rather than later. But a lot of guys need to be given more time to truly show what a franchise looks like under their tutelage. Jameis Winston in the same division signs a 2-year deal with the Saints. Yeah. So after all of this stuff plays out, the Saints don't get a high-profile free agent quarterback or trade for a big name quarterback. They're going to stick by Jameis Winston now on a 2-year deal. Let's see if he can rekindle what he started through a limited slate of games with the Saints last year. He looked really good. It looked like he was on his way to having a career year. I honestly thought this was probably the best deal for the Saints moving forward. They don't have to pay an egregious amount of money for him. He's familiar with the system. You got a brand new head coach. Like, let's just kind of like ease into this thing. They weren't ready to win like tomorrow.
Yeah.
So give it some time. And he did play pretty well. And they can still try and get a quarterback this year, or they can even, get a quarterback next year if things don't go well this season. So overall, Jameis Winston to the Saints, sticking with the Saints, seems like probably the best ideal for them moving forward, even if he's not a part of the long-term plans.
I think it's the Saints are the NFC version of the Steelers this morning. They have really good rosters who can compete, and they've just given themselves a ton of flexibility at the quarterback position going forward. If Jameis Winston can stay healthy, he can lead them to a playoff spot in the NFC. I 100% feel that way. Their roster's decent enough. Depending on how the coaching staff goes. I mean, again, we don't know yet. There's no Sean Payton there, so it's going to feel different in New Orleans. But right now, as you say, it's the opposite of the AFC. In the NFC, it's like I feel good about saying the Rams, the Packers, and the Bucs will be in the playoffs. I feel good about saying Dallas, and I feel okay about saying Philadelphia. So then those are, 5 spots. They have 2 spots that are completely wide open that a team like Minnesota with re-signing Kirk Cousins, a team like New Orleans should feel really good about putting themselves in a position to compete for those spots, depending on how everything shakes out. So I think there's a lot of flexibility. If we're a team that's dealing with a lot of cap hell, they don't have to deal with cap hell at the quarterback position. And who knows if the right quarterback falls to them in the draft, or a lot like Atlanta, would not be shocked if they're the team that you see get really aggressive and move up. Listen, Atlanta, Carolina, and New Orleans, all 3 of those NFC South teams were willing, I guarantee you, to match pick for pick with Cleveland for Deshaun Watson. I bet all of them were willing to go the 2 or 3 first rounders and then the high seconds and thirds, depending on, pick your poison with Houston. They weren't willing to do what Cleveland did as far as protecting Deshaun and guaranteed money. So all 3 of these teams should be willing to do what San Francisco did last year and say, all right, we'll give you the 2 first rounders to move up into the top 5, or 3 first rounders, whatever San Francisco did, to get in the top 5 if they feel that strongly about Willis. I guarantee you, I'll make an early guarantee of the season. One of those 3 teams will make an advanced move up to go aggressive for one of the quarterbacks that they like, because all 3 of them are willing to do it. All 3 of them are in a position to do it. All 3 of them have a guy in place, whether it's Darnold, Mariota, or Winston, to start the season. And then no matter what happens, maybe they finish the whole season, or the rookie can come on in. So watch for the NFC South to be the 3 aggressive players in that trade up for the quarterback market.
Absolutely. And honestly, I mean, we're talking about, there have been a lot of mocks and stuff, and we're going to do a mock draft and talk more about the draft order and those things as the draft gets closer. But a lot of people have been suggesting that there are going to be, quite a few quarterbacks available in the teens and into the 20s.
Yeah.
There's no way that's going to happen. And that's because every year since probably 2014, I want to say, we've seen multiple quarterbacks go in the first 15 picks. That's just the nature of the league right now. And Houston holds the number 3 overall pick. Who's to say Houston doesn't get the quarterback that they like? What if they're glued to Malik Willis? Then what's to say they don't take him just because they got Davis Mills from last year, who had an all right rookie season? I mean, they're not. Who's to stop them from doing that? And if that's the case, if you're Atlanta, Carolina, the Saints, some other team, the Steelers, who want to move up and get a quarterback, you're going to have to now jump Houston to number 2, or into the top 5.
Yeah, Houston's also that team that you're going to have to keep an eye out for, because they also could get out of that 3 overall pick and get bunch more picks for it. And then they're sitting pretty for the next 2 years, and they basically have the arsenal to say, over the next 2 years, no one can outbid us to get to number 1 overall, even if we wanted it. And they may lose enough games to get it anyways and not have to trade in those picks. So, yeah.
And they have the number 13 pick this year too. So they could just say, we'll get rid of 3. If someone falls to us at 13, we'll take them. If not, we'll take a good player. And we already got a haul for our number 3 overall pick.
I don't have the draft order in front of me. If you do, I mean, any of those teams I just mentioned in the South, you know what I mean? Like, they don't have to fall that far back out of 3. Houston's going to be, I know now we're getting a draft talk and we don't mean to do this, but this is when ripples like this happen and these massive moves happen. These are the things that GMs and presidents and owners and all these people, coaches, start to think about. These are the scenarios that go on in an offseason. You don't know what every organization is capable of in thinking. The Houston Texans have made it pretty clear they like Davis Mills and they want to give Davis Mills a fair shot. So that, to me, means they're sending out the signal, hey, call us about number 3 overall. And if Houston can get some great draft capital in return, no one can outbid Houston then the next 2 years to get the quarterback they want, if there's a quarterback they want, whether it's trading for or whether it's trading up for.
100%. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. To round out the quarterback news, Mark, we've got the Rams extending Matthew Stafford to a 4-year, $160 million deal, $130 million of it guaranteed. That's what happens when you win a Super Bowl. You get paid. And, obviously he probably could have made a lot more money in other situations, but he's in LA. He just won a Super Bowl. They're primed to go make another run at this thing. Yeah. It's a great fit for Matt Stafford in LA. And this is great for LA. They have proven that the mold to win Super Bowls can be done against the traditional method. Yeah. And they've spent a lot of money on players and it's all worked out. And so look, you go and you spend big for a Von Miller for 1 year. And then you prepare to move off of them. I mean, there are things like that.
You let Buffalo make the stupidest contract in NFL history. Anyone who's overreacting that, but you want another guarantee? But Von Miller will be cut by the Buffalo Bills after 2 years. He will play next year and maybe the following year, and he will not be a Buffalo.
I would agree with that too. And I think the circumstance of the deal, I think it was probably heavily weighted. Yeah. To giving them outs after a couple of seasons.
And he'll make his money in those dead years of the contract after he gets cut. But he's willing. That's a 2-year deal of like, hey, let's get aggressive for the next 2 years.
Absolutely. And you know what? It may pay off. Just like it paid off for the Rams. They needed a pass rusher. The Bills needed a pass rusher. They needed someone on that end to solidify that side of the ball.
Stafford, I think, is a great re-signing, and it's worth money. You're paid for what you did, and again, it's $130 million guaranteed. That's more than Dak got guaranteed. That is just behind only Mahomes, Allen, Rodgers, and now Watson as far as guaranteed money for a quarterback position. And so it's not pennies. I know you said he could have maybe made more if he eventually went to the open market. We're seeing the way it goes. Yeah, but he made a ton of money in Detroit. Remember, he was still on that rookie contract where rookies got paid.
Yeah, I think he was the last group of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And he got a giant extension. He signed twice with Detroit, some big extensions. So Stafford's made a ton of money in his career, and he's in a great position. Now you're already seeing Stafford on AT&T commercials. Now he's going to bank in on this for the next couple of years, and good for him. And again, if for the Rams, you have to do it because you went all in as far as trading for him goes. So you don't have any draft capital to, get another quarterback. And in the NFC for the next 3 years, you can comfortably say we have one of the top 3 guys in the NFC. And he outdueled Brady in Tampa to get you to a Super Bowl this year. So you got to feel good about being with Matt Stafford in the NFC. The only thing you worry about the Rams is it's really hard to repeat as Super Bowl champions. So that's the only thing I worry about with the Rams going in next year right now. Or the only other, guess is like, all right, unless Trey Lance becomes, football Jesus in an offseason with Kyle Shanahan, like that would be a concern. But otherwise, you feel good about the Rams going into next year.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously to add to your point about hard to repeat, if history's telling us anything, the Super Bowl is in Arizona next year, and the winners of the Super Bowl the last 2 years have been the home team. So another obstacle for the Rams to overcome. Of course, I'm kidding a little bit there. But moving forward to the receivers, Mark, since we took care of quarterback business, I think that's the majority of the quarterback moves that we've seen. So we can take a breath for a second. Move to the wide receivers. The massive, massive deal to come out of this group, position group, is, of course, Davante Adams signing a huge 5-year, $141 million deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. They give up the 2022 first and second rounder for Adams and then give him this big deal. He reunites with his college quarterback. He's always wanted to play for the Raiders. So this deal made a lot of sense. Where it did make a lot of sense to me, Mark, was I was quite confused and surprised that Aaron Rodgers would be so content with returning to Green Bay because he had to have known that this was likely on the horizon. I'm surprised with what we've seen now that Aaron Rodgers was perfectly okay with not having Davante Adams on this roster. I mean, the Packers are a lot worse off today, not just with the Davante Adams loss, but obviously he's the biggest part of that, but for a number of reasons. So I was quite surprised about that overall. But for Adams, of course, it makes a lot of sense. And the Raiders now are in a great position offensively to contend with the likes of the Broncos and the Chiefs and the Chargers.
Listen, I think it's a smart move by Vegas. I got to be honest. I think, you know that you're paying a guy a lot of money, and he's most likely going to miss a game or two each year. Adams tweaks things like that, but he is, when healthy, with DeAndre Hopkins, in my opinion, the two best wide receivers still in the NFL when they're both healthy. Route running, catchability, size, speed, those rare combos. There's some young guys coming up quick, Jefferson and Chase and a lot of great young receivers out there, but Adams and Hopkins still, I would go with 1 and 2. And listen, you're not getting him in his prime. You're going to get, 2 great years. You'd hope the next 2 years are great. And then a declining year. And then you get him at the end of his career when you just, you got to pay him, but it's not going to be ideal, but you hope he can still really contribute and be able to be a great number 2 wide receiver and still be there with Derek Carr. But listen, the Raiders had to make this move. The AFC West right now, and you have to be aggressive. One of those teams will still finish in 4th place. It most likely will probably be the Raiders, which is crazy because they were a playoff team to push the Bengals to their limit in Cincinnati with an interim head coach. And now they have an upgrade, you would imagine, a head coach. They upgraded their offense. And so to be honest, only giving up your first and second rounder this year. Their first rounder was a late one because they made the playoffs. Second rounder was a late second rounder because they made the playoffs. You would hope you'd get 2 starters from that, but they have a playoff team. It's not like they need a ton of starters. You needed a stud wide receiver because your stud wide receiver you thought you had is going to be in jail for a long time now, to put it, frankly. And now you have Waller, top 3 tight end. You have Adams, top 3 wide receiver. And you have a great, annoying Robin to your Batman with Hunter Renfrow. I think the Raiders, will be in a shootout in every single game, and this will keep them competitive. This will keep them from bottoming out when the division is loading on up. This will keep them very, very competitive. And I think, it's a lot of money. But again, those last 2 years, you could probably get out of that contract fairly easily. The guarantees will come early. And so you know how these contracts work. They're not going to spend actually $120-something million on Davante Adams. It'll be closer to this 60-something guaranteed, plus maybe that 4th year, and they'll be competitive during that time, and that's what is important. And they're giving their new head coach a chance to be competitive. So I like that from that standpoint of the team being aggressive in that way. And for Aaron Rodgers, the Packers, I am surprised as well. But I think what it just goes to show you is that for all of Aaron's braggadocious flirting with the Denvers and the Steelers I think it comes down to it's revealing he always was going to stay in Green Bay. He wanted to make Green Bay just pay and pay big. And Aaron Rodgers at this point, I think in his career just knows that, yeah, I'd like to win a Super Bowl. There's no reason Aaron Rodgers wants to win Super Bowls. Let's just be honest about that. But I think what Aaron Rodgers also realizes, I can win my division no matter what, as long as the teams are the way they are. And I want to just make you pay from keeping me in Green Bay. My fiance called off our wedding because of it. We're still trying to figure it out. I want money. I want $150 million guaranteed to stay in Green Bay for 3 more years. And then I will peace out and probably retire and, go off of the sunset having made close to $500 million playing quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. And I think he's content with that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this is going to play out. A lot of people are saying that they don't have even a number 2 wide receiver on the team. I'm one of the few, I think, that is pretty high on Allen Lazard as a player overall. Yeah. I think that Aaron has avoided him due to whatever reason, whether it's, he doesn't have a strong relationship with him or he wanted to always find Davante. I think Lazard is a very capable receiver. I think he can probably elevate to a wide receiver 1 in this league. We just got to find out. But that still doesn't cover the fact that there are holes in the rest of the receiving core. And there's no one else even close to being a primary target for Aaron Rodgers.
They got work to do. They
got work to do. They're going to have to invest in this draft in wide receiver. Like, they're going to have to get 2 wide receivers within the first couple days of this draft to even just show an attempt at salvaging this offense.
They have 2 first-rounders now. They have, I think, 2 second-rounders now. So they got plenty of picks in the first 2
They have ammo. They have ammunition.
To get a pass rusher, another offensive lineman, and 2 wide receivers. If they can do that with their first 4 picks, that's desperately needed, and I agree with you 100%.
And we'll see if they end up trading away Jordan Love at some point to acquire more picks. But right now,
consider it.
What's that?
I would strongly consider it if people are
absolutely.
If you can get a 3rd rounder for Jordan Love or a 4th and like a 6th, I think you do it because you got to find cheap starters. You got to find cheap starters who play above their worth if you're the Green Bay Packers right now with how much you're paying Aaron.
And let's be honest, Jordan Love hasn't inspired much confidence on tape to show anyone that he's worth a high draft pick either. So the Packers may have to just, for lack of a better term, like take the loss on it and move forward.
Yeah.
In other wide receiver news, Allen Robinson gets signed to the Los Angeles Rams, and they end up sending Robert Woods to Tennessee. Obviously, I'm sure you feel great for Allen Robinson, who I wouldn't say his years were wasted in Chicago, but certainly they could have done more to help him out. But when the guy has been catching passes from the likes of the Mike Glennons, Nick Foles of the world, and just the absolute carousel, Blake Bortles, like the carousel of bad quarterback play he's gotten in his career, he finally goes to a stable place with a great offense, a really good quarterback. Allen Robinson is set up to shine in this offense that is probably not going to – they're probably going to move off of Odell. We'll see if they end up signing him.
I think they will sign Odell.
But, I mean, that's such a stacked wide receiver room, which is great. You want to have great wide receivers. It's just that's a lot of money to pay into your wide receivers that still have Van Jefferson too. But nonetheless, Allen Robinson in LA, Robert Woods in Tennessee for a 6th-round pick. What are your thoughts on that deal?
My thoughts are, first and foremost, I love Tennessee getting Robert Woods. I think he comes back healthy and is the perfect complement to Brown, not Julio Jones. I think you're actually going to see a better Ryan Tannehill this year and a more productive offense from the Titans, as long as Henry stays healthy and all that goes well. But even I like what's his name, the backup from the kid from Texas who they had running the ball hard for Tennessee at the end of the year.
Deontay Foreman, I believe.
Foreman. And I think that works so much better for Tennessee. So I really like that move if he comes back healthy and is able to start week 1. And honestly, Allen Robinson right now, and even last year, is a better wide receiver than Woods, Jefferson, and Odell Beckham Jr. So you have already improved. Now you have Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. If you have then your third wide receiver is a Odell or a Jefferson, either or. I mean, that is the best wide receiving core in the NFL.
Yeah.
That is. Even if Godwin comes back healthy with Evans and Godwin, that is absolutely. Allen Robinson is that good, and watch him have an incredible year, an absolute incredible year, and happy for them. The Rams, I know they've lost some pieces on defense, but they're going to be just as good offensively if everyone stays healthy because of this move.
They're poised to run it back, really. I mean, that's what they're setting themselves up for. And it's amazing that a team like them that spent so much is still able to make moves like this. It's incredible. I mean, they're
not paying draft picks. I think that's part of, I mean, they don't have to save any money for high draft picks. And you do have to realize when you're thinking about this, if you don't have first and second round draft picks, you're paying third rounders less than $1 million basically a year, or about that. That is cheap.
Sure.
Cheap labor that, if you're confident in your scouting department, can fill in as spot starters and as real depth for your team. And that allows you to pay the Donalds, the Staffords, the Cooper Kupps, the Robinsons. I mean, that's what it does. And so it is, like you said earlier in the show, a unique way to build your team.
And you have the capability of selling LA to people. The fact that you won a Super Bowl, you've been winning games, you got a young, vibrant head coach. Atmosphere's fun. That's a lot of great stuff for people to, maybe take a few million less to come compete for a Super Bowl and play there. So
you're absolutely right. And you do have to remember, so many NBA and NFL players, MLB players too, they have homes in LA. Whether it's condos, whether it's beach houses, whether it's apartments, these guys own property in LA. They just do. So that is one of those things where it's easy for guys to say yes to LA in that way. Most of them already have places lined up where they just know they can be, because in the offseason, they just, you're 27-year-old guy with multi-millions anyways. Buy yourself an apartment in LA. You're going to be in LA a lot anyways. You want to be out there spending your summers, your off time, workouts. So filming commercials, endorsements, it's just the way that type of stuff works anyways. So that's an easy sell for a lot of guys, LA.
Finally, with the wide receiver news, Juju Smith-Schuster is moving on from the Steelers and signs a one-year deal, kind of a prove-it deal, if you will, with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Second prove-it-year deal in a row.
Yep. And that's, it was a cold wide receiver market for the most part. It took quite a while for a lot of these receivers to end up getting signed. And that just goes to show that, it's almost like wide receivers the new running back in regards to, you can find elite wide receiver talent later in drafts.
Yep.
And there's so many in every draft class to pick from that they're just becoming a little less valuable in terms, the elite of the elites, like the Davante Adams, the DeAndre Hopkins, they will still garner their markets. But some of these mid-level wide receivers just aren't getting the contracts that maybe they think they deserve. But I think this is the best move for Juju because he goes to an offense that he's going to be highly productive in from the start, because he's a physical guy. He's a really good third down threat, solid slot guy.
Yep.
And just is going to be a big asset. Like, they improved their receiving core with him. So in terms of, hey, if I'm going to go anywhere, let's go to Kansas City, because that's going to improve my stock and help my chances at getting a long-term deal, maybe even with Kansas City following this year. So I think it's a great move for both sides.
Yeah, you got to remember, he's still young. And I definitely think it is, you're absolutely right. The best case scenario for him is that he has a really great year, helps them win, fits into the culture, and then Kansas City signs him to a reasonable 3-year deal to be that second guy against Tyreek Hill for the last 3 years of Tyreek Hill's prime. Because Tyreek Hill at this point in time, you gotta argue, he's one of those top 5 wide receiver guys that
absolutely
has, he's got a little more on the tires than I would say a Hopkins, but these primes last short for running backs and wide receivers. So, for Juju, There may have been more money out there in another team. I can imagine a team like a Detroit or a team like a Chicago or
maybe Jacksonville.
Jacksonville offered a 2-year, maybe double what he's getting in Kansas City. But I think Juju's the type of guy that understands the value of being in a Kansas City and competing. And again, a little bit like Odell Beckham Jr. when he was trying to figure out a way out of Cleveland and accepted the deal to LA. You have to prove to the NFL and general managers that you can be a part of a winning culture and that you can assimilate to that, because he's had some rough, years in Pittsburgh optically. And, a little bit like Baker Mayfield was talking about, like the NFL, as you mentioned, you can go from hero to we don't care about you very quickly, because you can find Darnell Mooney's in the 6th round. You can find guys, cheap, good labor in the draft if you're good at it. And there is wide receivers are quickly becoming a dime a dozen. So I'll put it this way. I'll be honest. I think it makes sense for him there. Makes sense for Kansas City. And I'm very glad the Bears didn't sign him. I'm glad. I think the Bears, I know that the Bears didn't get a star wide receiver, but I think that shows they believe in Mooney. They got a guy in Byron Pringle out of Kansas City who I really like, who's a speedster guy who pulls nose really well. And also they get St. Brown from Green Bay, who their offensive coordinator knows really well, coming over from Green Bay as the quarterback coach. So I think there's some, you have a Mooney who's going to go in your season as a 1. And then if you draft a guy in the first or second round is a, not the first round as a Bear, because you don't have, because of the Fields trade, but a high, you still got to take a guy in probably day 2 in the draft to the wide receiver to compete with those guys. But I would rather that than force it and make it feel like Juju's your 1 when he's not a 1. Mm-hmm. At best, he's a really great 3rd down option as a physical receiver opposite some speedsters and a tight end who can really open up the middle of the field for you. So I think it's a great spot for Juju. And, a lot of times for guys like that, you don't want to go to a place where it feels like, are you the 1? Because he tried to be the 1 after Brown left Pittsburgh, and it fell flat in his face with the media, with social media, and with just production.
Yeah, and, injuries played a factor as well. And so a fresh start for Juju definitely can't go wrong there in Kansas City. We talked about it a couple years ago, really, before we even started this podcast, about like not being able to trust Cincinnati and how they were going to rally around Burrow once he got drafted. And then, that's something we've brought up quite a bit on this show. They have now shown, at least up to this point, that they're willing to go about it the right way and protect him and give him what he needs. We thought that the not drafting Penei Sewell might have come to bite them. It turns out, well, they gave him a great weapon in Jamar Chase, who seems like just an absolute world beater. So he's got great weapons surrounding him. And now what they've done is gone out and get La'el Collins from the Dallas Cowboys, a great right tackle.
Didn't overpay him.
Yep, didn't kill their cap to get him. And Collins now joins Alex Kappa from the Buccaneers that they went and got. They went and got Ted Karras as well. So they got their guards, they got their right tackle. They still have Jonah Williams, who's a young left tackle. And so a lot of pieces are starting to come together. I'm liking what the Bengals have done so far, and this off of a year that they got to the Super Bowl.
The Bengals need to still probably spend a day 2 pick on another offensive lineman, someone to come in and compete for that left tackle spot. And if not, could always be a swing tackle guard guy to come on in and really compete. Injuries happen, and they're still thin at offensive line. Sure. I'll say this. I remember a year ago, we were pushing hard for the Bengals to draft offensive linemen. And if you remember, I wish we'd go back and look and listen to the tape. I said the episode after the draft, I really loved the Bengals taking Chase, and I spun zone it like this. And who would have known it would have led to a Super Bowl at this time appearance? But I said at some point in time, teams like Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Detroit, you have to draft players you think are going to be stars, because you can't get stars in free agency because they don't want to come to those teams. And I said at that time, you can always overpay offensive linemen to come to Cincinnati. They don't give a crap. Offensive linemen don't need the good weather. They don't need the flash of Vegas or Miami or New York, Chicago, or LA. They are okay going to Cincinnati. And what did they do? Here they got their star to be the connection between Burrow and Chase. We knew it would be good, but I mean, it was beyond good. They are special. And Burrow is even more special with the confidence of having that guy in Chase. And that wide receiving core is incredible.
Yeah, they drafted T. Higgins as well.
And now what did they do? They went out and got aggressive in free agency, and they completely fixed their offensive line. But part of that was also they won. And when you show that you can be a winning culture, people will sign on to that. It is exactly what the Jaguars need to do right now. They're in the same spot. They need to go this year's draft. They need to find some stars to go with the weapons they've already got. And maybe that star is a left tackle or an offensive lineman. They do need offensive line help. And then hopefully, it doesn't mean they have to get to the Super Bowl. And the AFC's tough. But the Jaguars now need to look at this and go, our priority is somehow scrapping out 6 to 7 wins. So this time next year, we can show to potential free agents we're building something. Like Cincinnati did, only Cincinnati did it with an actual Super Bowl run. So Cincinnati supercharged it all, mainly because Burrow is just that special. So Cincinnati is going to be a real player. This was not a fluke run by them to the Super Bowl, and they are now better. So if they can, they'll take a step back, obviously, in a lot of ways. It's hard to recreate miracle runs like they did, but they will be a playoff team. If they stay healthy for the most part, you've got to feel like Cincinnati's going to be a playoff team. Will they be a Super Bowl team again? I'm not 100% sure. But, that's why if you're a team in the AFC that's really bad right now, it's okay to be bad right now because you have a tough 3-year window right now where the top of your conference is extraordinarily good. Cincy belongs in that conversation with Buffalo and Kansas City, in my opinion, as the top of the conference.
Interesting. That's bold. I'm interested to see what our preseason predictions will line up with. I'm not as high on the Bengals moving into next season, but I will agree they're extremely talented and they're a competitive team. I would put them in this picture, but I think they may be one of those teams next year that made the playoffs last year, but not this upcoming season. They're kind of on that bubble for me, and not because of them necessarily, but because of everyone else and how much better a lot of other teams got. So that's kind of just my 2 cents on that. But finally, Mark, before we end the show, some sad news, of course. The NFL world lost kind of a legend. You could say certainly a pioneer in his own right. John Clayton, longtime NFL analyst and reporter, died at the age of 67. He was one of those guys. I don't know about for you, Mark, but for me, I was kind of a late bloomer with the NFL. I mean, I didn't start really getting into the league and enjoying and watching football until about 12 or 13 years old. And at that point, John Clayton was on the TV all the time on ESPN. I mean, he was the guy that they went to for the reports. He was kind of the guy that preceded the Adam Schefters and the Ian Rappaports that would come after him. I certainly am, he holds a special place in my heart in terms of being that guy that I associated with kind of my early years of fandom in the NFL.
100% agree. For anyone who's, 21, 20, well, really even, I would argue like 23, 24 or younger at this point in time, they will never understand what it was like for people our age and older to consume sports when we were young, or even for people older than us, even in their adult life. Now you have so many options to consume content in sports. You can just get it all through Twitter. You can get it through Barstool. You can get it through ESPN. You get it through Fox. You get it through podcasting, whatever you want. CBS, NBC,
the Football Lounge.
Yeah, the Football Lounge. You get it through however you want. Back in our day, I mean, it was, I started, my love of football started a little bit younger. I mean, I was religiously being devoted to football around that like 4th, 5th grade time of my life with my, mainly due to my mom's father, my grandpa. And the Bears were good at that time. Those 01 Bears were like my first team. They lost in the playoffs to the Eagles, the Dick Duran Bears in 01, rookie Brian Urlacher years, Mike Brown, all those guys. So that's my beginning of, love for football. But John Clayton on ESPN with Sean Salisbury, the professor and the jock, the quarterback, doing 1st through 4th down in those segments. I mean, that was it was Phil and I, religious TV watching, my little brother Phil and I. So, yeah, obviously very sad, but you won't understand what that's like to have. You only had ESPN. You would tune in to ESPN, and that was everything. And they would, the 5 or 6 people on there, Chris Berman, John Clayton, one of them, Chris Mortensen, Ron Jaworski, they were the religious. That's who you listened to for your coverage. Boomer and what's his name from the Denver Broncos linebacker, great, who would do NFL primetime.
Oh,
TJ Jackson.
Yeah. Yes.
So you had, those were it. And now it's like you got a million different personalities to listen to, all of different things that they do. And that's great. Sports should be more accessible and everyone gets their flavor from something. But he was unique. He was one of those people who was always ahead of his time and making fun of himself, leaning into being the nerd who didn't play football but could cover football. And so he definitely, was one of those guys who I'm like, I didn't think about it, but for the past couple of years, like where's John Clayton been? You don't see him around as much and, battling some illness. And so certainly will be missed. Certainly will be missed.
He also gave us the greatest "This Is Sports Center" commercial of all time. We have seen that. We have seen that circulating throughout. It always puts a smile on my face. Just hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious. And that goes to your point about him, not taking himself too seriously at times. So always good stuff. And he will be remembered in NFL circles for a long, long time. A Hall of Famer for sure. No doubt about that. But we'll certainly be keeping tabs on the news as it continues. Pro days are wrapping up this week.
Yeah.
And then pretty much it's draft season. So, it's been draft season, but we've had so much with the free agency and other things. We'll finally start to get into the draft.
There's still some big names out there that you expect to get.
There are.
Yep. A lot of them probably are waiting now to see what post-draft is like. If you're a Bobby Wagner, you may make more sense to wait because teams could get more desperate if they don't get the linebacker they want in the draft to pay you. So there's still some of those names out there that I think you'll see cash in on some decent deals as we get closer to training camp post-draft or maybe right leading up to the draft as trades start to happen and people realize they're going to get or not going to get. Baker Mayfield now is the main piece I think we keep our eyes on in the coming weeks. But it's an exciting time. And then I have a feeling we should do sometime in April before we do our draft preview. We might have to do a quick prediction of what we think the AFC playoffs are going to look like.
No kidding. Yeah.
From hearing what you said about Cincinnati, I'm fascinated now because I very high on Cincinnati staying very high at top of the AFC. So we may have to do a pre-draft AFC, what we look like. The NFC is way too hard to predict right now. So the AFC, we might have to, and then a post-draft as well, before the season starts. We might have to do a little bit more digging on where our thoughts of the AFC look like right now.
Yeah, why not? That'll be fascinating. And then obviously what happens in the draft will dictate a lot of things too. But Baker Mayfield, obviously something to keep an eye on. Jimmy Garoppolo, another big name quarterback to keep an eye on. We'll see if he ends up getting traded before the draft, but he might be a post-draft type of casualty as well.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of see what happens over the next week. And of course, we'll be back here with plenty of commentary next Monday. Of course, as always, we're on Twitter, Facebook at FB Lounge Pod, and on Facebook as well. We're also on YouTube if you want to watch the show instead of just listening to it. So be sure to give us a like, subscribe there on YouTube. But we will see you all back here next week. Have a great week of spring as it is officially begun, and we're getting ready for this thing. Draft coming up very soon.